The school stood tall at the edge of the city, surrounded by old trees and quiet streets. And inside its walls, hundreds of students followed the same routine every day, believing they knew exactly what to expect from their teachers, their classmates, and themselves. Among them was a young black girl named Amara, who walked the halls with her head slightly lowered, not because she lacked confidence, but because she had learned that being quiet often kept her unnoticed and safe. She was known as polite, well-behaved, and serious, and most people saw her as just another student blending into the background. Amara came from a modest home where her mother worked long hours, and her evenings were often spent alone doing homework and helping with chores. Music had been part of her life for as long as she could remember. An old piano sat in the corner of their small living room, its surface worn but cared for. It had belonged to her grandfather, who once played in a local church. He taught Amara her first notes before passing away, and after that the piano became a place where she expressed feelings she could not easily put into words. At school, however, almost no one knew about her connection to music. There was a music room with a grand piano, but it was rarely used except during official events, and Amara never volunteered to play. She understood that attention could be unpredictable, and she preferred the safety of staying unseen. She focused on her studies and listened more than she spoke. One afternoon, the principal announced a school-wide assembly to celebrate academic achievement and student discipline. The gym filled with students, teachers, and staff, all seated in orderly rows. The principal, a confident man known for his authority and sharp humor, stood at the front speaking proudly about school values and success. His words echoed through the room, and students listened, some with interest, others with boredom. As the assembly continued, the principal decided to lighten the mood and made a comment about discovering hidden talents among the students. He scanned the crowd with a playful smile, and his eyes landed on Amara sitting quietly near the middle. Perhaps because she looked reserved, perhaps because he assumed she would never stand out, he called her name and asked her to come forward. Murmurs spread through the room as she slowly stood and walked toward the stage. The principal smiled and gestured toward the piano placed near the side of the gym, and said with a joking tone that maybe she could entertain everyone by playing a song. Laughter rippled through parts of the audience, not out of cruelty, but from surprise and amusement. Amara felt every eye on her, and her heart raced as she stood beside the piano. She understood that this moment was not meant to honor her, but to amuse the crowd. For a brief moment, she considered refusing and returning to her seat, but something inside her held her still. She thought of her grandfather, her mother, and the hours she had spent alone at the piano, pouring her feelings into the keys. She took a deep breath and nodded quietly. The laughter faded into silence as she sat down and placed her hands on the keyboard. The gym grew still as the first notes filled the air, soft and controlled, carrying a motion that surprised everyone listening. Amara played with focus and grace, her fingers moving confidently as if she were alone in her living room. Students leaned forward, teachers exchanged looks, and the principal's expression slowly changed from amusement to disbelief. The music flowed through the space, transforming the atmosphere and revealing a depth no one had expected from the quiet girl they barely noticed. Amara played not to impress but to express, and in doing so she began a moment that would change how the entire school saw her and themselves. If any dots or ellipses appear, rewrite the content. Without them, the moment Amara finished the last movement of the piece, her hands rested gently on the keys, and the gym remained silent, as if everyone needed time to understand what they had just witnessed. The sound had reached places inside people they did not expect, and the quiet that followed felt heavy and meaningful rather than awkward. Amara slowly stood up, her face calm but her heart beating fast as she looked out at the crowd that no longer seemed distant but deeply connected. Then the silence broke as applause began from one corner and quickly spread across the entire gym, growing louder and stronger with every second. Students stood, teachers clapped without hesitation, and some even wiped their eyes. The principal remained still for a brief moment, his smile gone, replaced by a look of surprise and reflection. He stepped forward and nodded, acknowledging the performance with a seriousness that matched the moment. Amara returned to her seat, feeling both light and overwhelmed, unsure of how to process what had just happened. Classmates turned toward her with expressions of awe and curiosity. Some whispered her name, others simply stared as if seeing her for the first time. She kept her eyes forward and focused on slowing her breath, reminding herself that the music had carried her through and that it was over now. After the assembly ended, the hallways buzzed with conversation as students replayed the performance in excited voices. Teachers discussed it in quiet tones, and word spread quickly to classrooms, offices, and even parents waiting outside. Amara walked through the noise, feeling strangely separate from it all, as if she were moving through a dream. A few students stopped her to offer shy compliments, and she thanked them politely, still unsure how to respond to attention. Later that day, Amara was called to the principal's office. Her steps felt heavy as she walked down the familiar corridor, wondering if she had done something wrong despite the applause. When she entered the office, the principal stood up and gestured for her to sit. His tone was different than before, quieter and more thoughtful. He spoke about the assembly and admitted that he had not expected what happened. He thanked her for sharing her talent and acknowledged that his joke had underestimated her. Amara listened respectfully and nodded but did not speak much. She was not angry, but she felt the weight of being misunderstood for so long. The principal encouraged her to consider joining the school music program and offered support if she wished to perform again in a more respectful setting. She thanked him and said she would think about it before leaving the office. At home that evening, Amara told her mother everything, from the moment her name was called to the applause that followed. Her mother listened with pride and concern, holding her hand and reminding her that talent was a gift but also a responsibility. She asked Amara how she felt, and Amara admitted she felt proud but also exposed. Her mother hugged her tightly and told her that being seen could be scary, but it could also open doors. The next day at school, Amara noticed a change in how people treated her. Teachers smiled more, classmates invited her into conversations, and some students asked if she could teach them how to play. While the attention was kind, it felt unfamiliar and sometimes uncomfortable. She missed the quiet anonymity she once had, but she also felt a growing sense of confidence knowing that her voice mattered. As days passed, the music teacher approached Amara with an invitation to practice in the music room after school. The room felt different now, welcoming and full of possibility. Sitting at the grand piano, Amara felt both nervous and excited. She realized that the joke meant to embarrass her had instead revealed something powerful, not just to others, but to herself. Part 2 of her journey became a time of adjustment and reflection, as Amara learned to navigate recognition without losing her sense of self. She understood that what stunned the whole school was not just her ability to play the piano, but the reminder that hidden stories and talents existed in places people least expected. And she knew that this moment was only the beginning of a much larger change in her life. And in the hearts of those who had listened, the weeks after the assembly brought changes that moved slowly but reached deeply into Amara's life and into the rhythm of the school. The excitement did not fade quickly, and her name continued to be spoken with curiosity and respect. Yet Amara herself tried to keep her days steady by focusing on classes, homework, and familiar routines. She understood that attention could shift at any moment, and she did not want her sense of self to depend on it. The music room became a place of quiet discovery for her. After school, she sat at the grand piano practicing pieces she knew and exploring new ones suggested by the music teacher. The room smelled of polished wood and old sheet music, and for the first time Amara felt welcome there. The teacher watched her play with care, offering guidance without pressure and encouraging her to trust her instincts. These moments helped Amara grow not just as a pianist, but as someone learning to accept support. Some classmates approached her with genuine interest, wanting to understand how long she had been playing and where she learned. Others kept their distance, unsure how to interact with someone who had suddenly stepped into the spotlight. Amara responded with kindness, but remained reserved, knowing that not every question needed an answer. She learned that boundaries were important, especially when people began to define her only by her talent. At home, her mother noticed a shift in her posture and her voice. Amara spoke with more assurance and shared stories from school that once would have stayed silent. They spent evenings together listening to music and talking about the future in gentle, hopeful ways. Her mother reminded her often that music should bring joy first, and that no opportunity was worth losing her sense of peace. One afternoon, the principal visited the music room during practice hours. He stood quietly at the back listening before speaking. His presence made Amara nervous, but he addressed her with respect, thanking her again for the moment she had shared with the school. He explained that the administration wanted to support student talents more thoughtfully, and asked if she would be willing to perform at an upcoming community event representing the school. Amara asked for time to consider, and he agreed without pressure. This invitation stayed with her as she walked home that day. She thought about what it meant to be seen as a representative, and how responsibility often followed recognition. She felt proud but cautious, knowing that one performance had already changed her life in unexpected ways. She talked it through with her mother, who encouraged her to listen to her heart, and to remember that saying yes should feel right, not forced. At school, the environment continued to shift in subtle ways. Teachers used her story as an example of hidden potential, and students seemed more willing to step forward with their own interests. Amara noticed a girl from her class signing up for the art club, and a quiet boy asking about joining the debate team. These small changes made her realize that her moment had rippled outward, touching others in ways she never intended. Part 3 of Amara's journey became about learning how influence worked, and how personal courage could inspire collective change. She was still the same girl who loved quiet evenings and simple melodies, but she was also becoming someone who understood that her voice carried weight. She did not yet know where this path would lead, but she was learning to walk it with care, honesty, and growing confidence. The decision about the community event stayed with Amara for many days, and she carried it quietly through her classes and practice sessions. She understood that saying yes would mean stepping further into view and allowing more people to form opinions about her and her music. The thought was both exciting and heavy. She spoke with her music teacher, who encouraged her gently and reminded her that growth often asked for bravery more than perfection. Eventually, Amara agreed to perform, and once the decision was made, her days gained a new structure. Practice became more focused and intentional, and she began learning a longer, more demanding piece that required patience and emotional control. Some days the music flowed easily, and other days frustration crept in when her fingers refused to follow her thoughts. During those moments, she learned to pause, breathe, and begin again rather than giving up. At school, the atmosphere around her continued to change. Teachers treated her with a quiet respect, and students looked to her with curiosity that felt less playful and more sincere. She noticed that people listened when she spoke in group discussions and that her ideas were taken seriously. This shift made her realize how often voices went unheard simply because people expected them to be quiet. The principal checked in occasionally, not as an authority figure, but as someone trying to learn from past mistakes. His tone was thoughtful and his actions more careful. Amara appreciated this change even though she remained reserved. She understood that respect was built over time through consistency rather than words. As the event approached, nerves returned, but this time they felt different from the fear she had known during the assembly. These nerves came from wanting to honor the opportunity rather than escape it. Her mother attended rehearsals when possible, sitting quietly in the back of the room, offering presence instead of instruction. Afterward, they walked home together, talking about everyday things, which helped keep Amara grounded. On the day of the community event, the venue was smaller than the school gym, but filled with parents, teachers, students, and local residents. Amara stood backstage, listening to the low hum of conversation and feeling the familiar weight of anticipation. She reminded herself why she played and thought of the quiet moments at home, where music had been her companion rather than a performance. When she stepped onto the stage, she felt calm and steady, and as she began to play, she noticed how the audience leaned into the sound. The music carried warmth and confidence, shaped by weeks of preparation. When she finished, the response was sincere and full, and Amara felt a sense of belonging rather than surprise. Part 4 of her journey became a lesson in ownership and choice. Amara was no longer reacting to a moment created by others, but shaping experiences through her own decisions. She learned that courage could be practiced, and that confidence grew through action repeated with care. The girl who once stayed quiet now understood that her voice mattered, and that using it thoughtfully could change not only her life, but the spaces she entered. The days after the community event felt calmer but more meaningful for Amara. The applause had faded, yet something steady remained inside her. She returned to school not as a surprise but as herself, and that difference mattered. People no longer spoke about her only as the girl from the assembly, but as someone with dedication and presence. This shift helped her feel less defined by a single moment and more accepted as a whole person. Practice continued, but now it carried deeper intention. Amara and her music teacher worked on understanding emotion in music rather than just accuracy. She learned how small changes in touch could alter feeling, and how silence between notes could speak just as clearly as sound. These lessons required patience and awareness, and sometimes left her mentally tired, yet she felt herself growing in ways that reached beyond music. At school, Amara began noticing challenges that came with visibility. Some students assumed she would always succeed, and others quietly compared themselves to her. She felt pressure to live up to expectations that were never spoken aloud. On difficult days, she questioned whether she deserved the praise she received. During these moments, she reminded herself that growth was not about proving worth, but about staying honest. Her mother remained her strongest support and anchor. They talked openly about fear, pressure, and balance. Her mother encouraged her to rest when needed, and to remember that joy was just as important as discipline. These conversations helped Amara avoid losing herself in achievement. One afternoon, a younger student approached Amara in the hallway and said she wanted to learn piano because she saw her play. The simple statement touched Amara deeply and reminded her that influence did not always come from intention, but from example. She realized that her journey was beginning to inspire others quietly and naturally. The principal announced plans to expand the arts program and invited Amara to share her experience with a small group of students. She agreed cautiously and spoke honestly about fear, practice, and self-belief. Her words were simple but sincere, and students listened closely. Afterwards, several thanked her for speaking in a way that felt real. Part 5 of Amara's journey became about balance and responsibility. She learned that talent brought opportunity, but character sustained growth. She understood that being seen carried both light and weight, and that handling both required humility and care. She continued walking forward with steady steps, choosing honesty over perfection, and trust over fear, as her story moved quietly toward its next chapter. As time moved forward, Amara began to feel the weight of her growth in ways she had not expected. The school year continued with exams, projects, and responsibilities, and music was now woven into every part of her identity. She was no longer just a student who played the piano, but someone others looked to for inspiration and example. This awareness followed her through hallways, classrooms, and even quiet moments alone. Her practice sessions became more demanding as she prepared for another upcoming school event, meant to highlight student creativity. Unlike before, this event was planned with care and respect, and Amara had been invited rather than singled out. Still, the pressure she placed on herself felt heavier than any expectation from others. She wanted to represent herself honestly and also honor those who believed in her. Some days confidence came easily, and the music flowed with warmth and clarity. Other days doubt crept in quietly, telling her she might disappoint people who now expected something special. During those moments, she returned to the basics, sitting at the piano and playing simple melodies that reminded her why she loved music in the first place. These sessions helped her reconnect with joy rather than performance. At school, she noticed that teachers gave her more responsibility, asking her to help organize events or mentor younger students interested in music. While she appreciated the trust, she sometimes felt overwhelmed by the added expectations. She learned to speak up gently when she needed space, and discovered that setting boundaries did not reduce respect but increased it. Her friendships also shifted during this period. A few classmates who once ignored her now wanted to be close, while others grew distant, unsure of where they fit. Amara handled these changes with quiet grace, choosing sincerity over popularity. She spent more time with friends who knew her before the music brought attention, and who treated her the same regardless of applause. At home, her mother noticed signs of fatigue and encouraged her to slow down when needed. They created small routines like evening walks and shared meals without distractions. These moments grounded Amara and reminded her that her value did not depend on achievement. Her mother's words carried steady reassurance and helped her breathe more easily during stressful weeks. One evening after a long day, Amara sat alone at the piano and reflected on how a single moment had reshaped her path. She realized that growth was not a straight line, but a series of choices made daily with intention. She understood that part 6 of her journey was about endurance and self-care, learning how to carry responsibility without letting it silence her inner voice. As she continued forward, Amara felt stronger, not because fear had disappeared, but because she had learned how to move with it. She was no longer defined by the joke that once placed her in the spotlight, but by the strength she showed in building something meaningful afterward. Her story was becoming less about surprise and more about substance, and she stepped into the future with quiet determination and growing wisdom. If any dots or ellipses appear, rewrite the content without them. Rewrite the content without them. The weeks that followed became a defining season for Amara, as life slowly settled into a new rhythm, shaped by confidence, responsibility, and quiet strength. The attention that once felt overwhelming now felt manageable, because she no longer viewed it as a measure of her worth. She walked through the school halls with steady steps, aware of how much had changed, yet rooted in who she had always been. Music continued to be central to her days, but it no longer felt like something she had to prove. It felt like a conversation between her heart and the world. She practiced regularly, not driven by fear of failure, but by curiosity and care. Each session at the piano became an opportunity to understand herself better, and to express emotions that words could not easily hold. At school, Amara noticed subtle shifts in the environment that extended beyond her own story. Students who once stayed silent now spoke up more often, and clubs that struggled for members began to grow. Teachers encouraged creative expression more openly, and assemblies included moments where students shared talents without fear of judgment. Amara realized that her moment at the piano had opened a door for others to feel safe stepping forward. She was invited to help mentor a small group of younger students interested in music, and although she hesitated at first, she accepted with humility. Guiding them through basic rhythms and listening to their excitement reminded her of her own early connection to sound. She learned that teaching was not about authority, but about patience, encouragement, and shared discovery. These sessions strengthened her sense of purpose and grounded her growth. Her relationship with teachers deepened as well, and conversations shifted from praise to guidance and trust. They spoke with her about balancing academics, creativity, and rest. Amara appreciated being treated as a whole person rather than a symbol. This respect helped her feel secure and supported rather than pressured. The principal also continued to change, and their interactions reflected mutual learning rather than hierarchy. He spoke openly about the importance of creating spaces where students felt seen and valued without being singled out unfairly. Amara listened and understood that growth could come from reflection and accountability. She did not carry resentment because she saw genuine effort toward change. At home, her mother observed how Amara carried herself with calm maturity. Their conversations grew deeper, touching on dreams, fears, and the meaning of success. Her mother reminded her often that character mattered more than recognition, and that joy should never be sacrificed for approval. These words stayed with Amara, especially during moments of doubt. There were still challenges, of course. Moments when expectations felt heavy or when comparisons surfaced among peers. Amara learned to step back during these times and reconnect with simple routines like walking home, listening to music, or playing quietly for herself. She understood that rest was not weakness but wisdom. Part 7 of her journey became a chapter defined by influence without ego and confidence without noise. Amara no longer needed a stage to feel strong because she carried strength within her. She understood that what truly stunned the whole school was not a single unexpected performance, but the lasting change it inspired in how people saw potential in others and in themselves. The final part of Amara's journey arrived gently without announcements or applause, yet it carried a deep sense of completion that she could feel in her everyday life. She was no longer walking toward something unknown, but walking within a life she had slowly and carefully shaped. The girl who once kept her head down had learned how to stand with quiet assurance, and that change felt natural rather than forced. As the school year moved toward its end, Amara continued balancing her studies, music, and mentoring with steady focus. She was no longer overwhelmed by expectations because she had learned how to define success for herself. Success now meant honesty, effort, and balance rather than praise or attention. This clarity brought peace and allowed her to enjoy moments without questioning their value. Music remained a constant companion, but it had matured alongside her. She composed small pieces inspired by daily life, by conversations, by memories of her grandfather and evenings at home with her mother. These pieces were simple but meaningful, and when she shared them with her teacher and younger students, they listened with genuine interest. Amara discovered that creation brought a different kind of fulfillment than performance. At school, the environment continued reflecting the change that had begun months earlier. Student events became more inclusive, and teachers encouraged participation without fear of embarrassment. Amara noticed how students from different backgrounds felt more comfortable sharing talents, ideas, and opinions. She understood that her story had become part of the school history not as a spectacle, but as a reminder of respect and possibility. The principal invited Amara to speak briefly at a small end-of-year gathering, not to perform, but to share a message. She agreed and spoke honestly about fear, courage, and the importance of being careful with words and assumptions. Her voice was calm and sincere, and the room listened closely. Afterwards, several students thanked her for saying what they felt but could not express. This moment confirmed for Amara that her voice mattered beyond music. At home, her relationship with her mother felt stronger than ever. They celebrated small victories and navigated challenges together. Her mother often said that watching Amara grow into herself had been the greatest reward. These moments grounded Amara and reminded her that love and support were the foundation beneath every achievement. As summer approached, Amara looked ahead with curiosity rather than fear. She considered future opportunities in music while also valuing education and balance. She understood that life would continue offering challenges, but she trusted her ability to face them with resilience and integrity. The joke that once placed her in the spotlight no longer defined her story. It had become only the beginning of a journey shaped by courage, patience, and self-respect. Amara learned that being stunned by someone else's talent was temporary, but being changed by understanding was lasting. In the end, Amara did not seek to amaze anyone. She simply chose to be honest and present. And through that choice, she discovered her strength, her voice, and her place in the world. Her journey closed not with certainty but with confidence, and that was more than enough.